It's Thursday, the 3rd of March 2022. Welcome to the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, we've got 5 stories to get through in 5 minutes. Let's get into it. Story number 1 is all about the economy. The Australian economy grew by 3.4% during the December quarter. It sounds good, but then you consider that was actually the strongest quarter-on-quarter result in nearly half a century.
Yeah, pretty incredible. Of course, it came after a shocking September quarter. The annual pace of growth was 4.2%, though that final number hides many, many ups and downs last year, thanks to those COVID lockdowns. The local economy is now 3% bigger than before the pandemic. Not surprisingly, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg was very enthusiastic about the outcome. He said that spending and investment were stronger again for the first 2 months of this year. Let's go through it. Consumer spending was really, really strong. People spent money on goods, things like fridges, TVs and things, not so much services, travel. No surprises there. The savings rate has fallen somewhat, but it's still pretty high. The construction sector, however, went backwards. That followed the end of the home builder subsidy, which came out in the first part of 2021. Business investment was lower, net exports were flat, and government spending, which has been a major driver of economic activity, particularly during the COVID period, fell last quarter. We're going to see a lot more of that. All in all, it tells us the Australian economy was in good shape as it entered 2022, and it's unlikely that the Omicron variant or the war in Ukraine or the floods along the East Coast will make much of an economic difference. That's really good news for whoever wins the federal poll, which of course is due sometime in the next 3 months.
Okay, story number 2, Sean, is looking overseas, and US President Joe Biden has warned that Russian President Vladimir Putin has badly miscalculated by invading Ukraine. He says freedom will always triumph over tyranny.
He did, and he said this as the bombing of major Ukrainian cities continued. There are plenty of pictures emerging of rubble and wreckage in Ukrainian cities as a result of Russia bombing populated urban areas, particularly Kyiv, the capital, and Kharkiv, the second largest city. Kharkiv has now been surrounded by Russian forces, and the 60-kilometre Russian military convoy that we were talking about yesterday is now just a couple of dozen kilometres from Kyiv. Now, this came as President Joe Biden, in his State of the Union address, said Mr. Putin had rolled into Ukraine expecting a quick victory, but had met with a wall of strength. He said the invasion was premeditated and totally unprovoked, and Russia was now isolated from the world more than ever.
Okay, story number 3, Sean, back home, and the local equity market had a pretty good day yesterday, but it masked some pretty big moves for individual companies.
It sure did. The price of Brent crude oil pushed above $110 a barrel. There's also fears that gas supplies out of Russia can be cut. What's that mean? Well, the local oil and gas players, Woodside Petroleum and Santos, their share prices surged. They jumped more than 6% yesterday. The big iron ore miners did really well. BHP was up 3.5%. Fortescue and Rio Tinto were both up about 4.5%. That's because the price of iron ore has risen. It masked what was otherwise a really poor day. The real estate investment trusts fell. The banks fell. Now, the technology and healthcare stocks did okay. While on markets, I just want to add something more about cryptocurrencies. We've talked a little bit about it the last couple of days. Yesterday, I said the value of Bitcoin had jumped sharply. There's speculation now that cryptocurrencies are being bought up by Russians as an escape hatch as the Russian ruble tumbles, and President Putin puts restrictions on foreign currency movements. Of course, you can't track Bitcoin and cryptocurrency movements, so it's a way for Russians to get money out of the country.
Okay. Story 4, Sean, and the focus of the floods crisis that has really been engulfing Queensland and much of northern New South Wales. The focus is really now in and around Sydney.
Yes, New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet declared 17 local government areas in the north of his state natural disaster zones. He's requested financial support from Prime Minister Scott Morrison. 4 people have now died due to flooding in the state on top of the 8 in Queensland, and Mr Perrottet said it was possible more people will die. Today is forecast to provide the heaviest falls for the Sydney Basin from Newcastle to Wollongong, with up to 200 millimetres expected.
Okay, final story, Sean, story number 5, and anyone who's listened to the Fast 5 in recent weeks would likely have heard you mention a story that's been developing in Europe on a ship. Give us the update.
Well, this is all about the burning ship. It caught on fire about 2 weeks ago. It has $400 million US worth of Audis, Bentleys, Porsches and Lamborghinis on board. It was also carrying electric vehicles, and the batteries on the electric vehicles, or at least on an electric vehicle, caught on fire, triggering this massive blaze. Finally, it's being towed back towards Portugal. It was happening yesterday and it sunk. It took the cargo with it. End of story. No more reports.
Until they start the salvage operation, Sean, then we can expect another update from you. Thank you very much. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 3rd of March, 2022. Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and if you'd like something a little bit longer, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed on your podcast platform. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.